What's going on, people? We are Tottenham TV here, back here for another takeaway video. This time it is the 10 takeaways from the whole season. As you know, we look at each and every game and take away 5 things that we can take away from the game. And now we're going to look at the whole season as a whole and look at 10 takeaways from the whole season. And let's start off with the first takeaway, which is overpowered front line.
So Spurs actually outscored their XG by the highest amount in the whole division. Spurs scored 68 goals during the season from an XG of 56. So they only expected to score 56, yet they scored 68. So outscoring it by just under 12 goals, which is the highest in the whole division. And that was majority actually made up of Son and Bale, who both outscored their XG. Son by 5.98 and Bale by 5.2, which pretty much made up for the whole overperformance. Kane actually didn't outscore his XG by much. He had an XG of about 22 and he scored 23. So Kane was getting the chances, but Son and Bell clearly had to make a lot out of not as much as Kane had. So it also showed Tottenham relying on individual brilliance a lot more than actual quality chances being created, and that's why we outperformed that XG by so much. And think about all the goals from outside the box that Son scored and stuff like that. That probably led to the overperformance.
Yeah, so exactly when you first mentioned that, that's the first thing that came to my head was Heung-min Son, because when we were kind of doing the season takeaways and we were looking at the Heung-min Son stats, you could just see how much he actually overperformed by in terms of XG. So yeah, that's definitely true.
And Bale as well, though. He only had an XG of 5 of about 6, and he scored 11 goals. Wow. So shows a lot of his finishes were high quality.
Yeah, most definitely. Let's look at the second takeaway, and that is lucky defence.
So on the other end of the scale, so we overperformed our XG by the top, and we were second in overperforming for defence as well. We were expected to concede 52 goals, and we only conceded 45, which is the 45 goals is the 6th lowest. Yet our XG were about 10th, and that's mainly to do with Hugo Lloris, because Hugo Lloris saved about 5 goals that he was expected to concede. So he was a big element to our overperformance at the back.
How many did he concede that he was expected to save?
How many did he concede? So he basically outperformed his XG, expected goals conceded. He outperformed it by about 5 goals, which is the highest in the Premier League. So that led to pretty much the majority. The other bits are led up by like bad finishing and stuff. Teams not finishing chances they should have. But we actually outperformed our defence, our XG defence, by about 7 goals. So we're outperforming on both ends, yet the result's still not coming.
It's interesting with the defence as well, because when you look at it, everyone knows that we need major surgery in our defence, but ultimately we conceded like the 4th least or something in the whole Premier League.
6th lowest.
6th lowest.
Well, 6th lowest defence. Yes, yeah.
And what 4th? We had the 4th or 5th highest goal difference as well.
Yeah.
Exactly. Which is actually mental when you think about it, thinking of how bad our defence has actually been.
100%, agreed. And I think that goes to show as well, like in terms of people criticising Mourinho for going so defensive, you can kind of understand it in a way, because if you look at our defence, we probably didn't have the 6th best defence instead of quality, but we had it instead of numbers.
All right, let's move on to the third takeaway, and that is going to be paying the penalty.
So Spurs conceded 10 penalties, which is only behind West Brom this season. And the penalties, obviously we mentioned before, the penalty, Sanchez and Dyer lead the way for penalties conceding. And Spurs it's cost Tottenham 6 points this season from conceding penalties, which obviously that would have got us top 4 without them. Those penalties were Newcastle at home in the last minute. You had Chelsea at home when Dyer fouled Werner. You had Arsenal away when
that Newcastle one was a bit
still cost us, didn't it? And then Everton away also cost us. So Spurs definitely paying the penalty this season for giving away the most penalties in the league. Yeah, and that shows clumsy defending.
I think every player in our back 4 has given away a penalty this year when you look at it. Toby, Sanchez, Aurier, Dyer, Reguilon. I mean, literally everyone has given away a penalty
pretty
this
much,
season.
yeah. When did Reguilon give one away?
Reguilon gave one... Oh, no, that was Dyer when he was kicking out. Reguilon gave one away against very recently in the last few games. I can't remember who it was against now.
Against Everton, was it? Potentially against Everton.
Yeah, I think it was against Everton with that stupid swipe.
Yeah, I think potentially against Everton. I think you might be right. But yeah, look, we've 10 penalties. We need to cut that down significantly. And again, it just goes back to our defenders being really clumsy in the box, and it's happened throughout the season. And that's we've paid for it ultimately.
All right, let's move on to the fourth takeaway, and that is free kick shocker. Even with Gareth Bale in the squad.
Even with Bale. Spurs are top of the league for shots attempted at free kicks this season. 35 shots attempted at free kicks.
How many of those is Harry Kane?
14. and he I think for attempted free kicks he's around like fourth in the table. Dyer is not far behind him in 8. He's 8 of those attempts with Eric Dyer. And we scored a grand total of 0. Free kicks in the Premier League this season, so that is something we definitely need to work on, being a threat from set pieces, because we clearly get a lot of attempts. We get more attempts than anyone else in the league, but unfortunately we couldn't make the most of any of them. Kane hit the post twice, I think, against City and against Arsenal, and that's it. That's the closest we came, pretty much.
Did Eric Dyer hit the bar from one of them as well?
I remember against Palace he forced a really good save on Guaita, didn't he, in the last minute. That's pretty much it.
All right. And the fifth takeaway is Højbjerg workhorse.
So he actually had a mad season when you look at the stats, Højbjerg. I'm just going to reel off some of the stats that he tops the Premier League in. So most tackles is with 118 is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. Most tackles won is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg 18. Most pressures on an opposition is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg 807. Most successful pressures is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. Most fouls committed is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. Most tackles on a dribbling player is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg. And most times a player has dribbled past them is Pierre-Emile Højbjerg as well. So he is top of the Premier League for every single one of those stats.
And that kind of keys into what we were saying yesterday in one of our videos when we were talking about Pierre-Emile Højbjerg in the player ratings. We were saying first half of the season he was absolutely phenomenal in kind of being that real aggressor in the middle of the park, but then kind of it got to a point in the season where he was being overplayed, and maybe a centre midfield partnership wasn't working later on in the season, and he just got completely overrun at times, and that reads into the facts, doesn't it?
It kind of feels like he's kind of playing a numbers game. Is if like, he's just gonna other players are more calculated in terms of when to press, when to tackle, and all that. But he kind of just goes every time, go hell for leather, and kind of like some you get, some you don't. That's kind of the way I feel like he plays a lot of time. But to top the Premier League at all of those is very. I'm not sure if it's impressive or I don't know what it is, but it's something definitely to note. He also ranks 9th in the whole league for progressive passes on the pitch. He ranks 3rd for passes into the final third, and he's one of 2 outfield players to have played every single minute in the Premier League. Do you know who the other outfield player is?
What, in the Premier League?
In the Premier League, in the whole Premier League. And he's one of 2 outfield players to play every single minute in the Premier League.
I'm going to go for... No, I don't know. Basuma.
James Ward-Prowse.
Oh, James Ward-Prowse.
From Southampton is the other player. So that goes to show how much an effect he's had on the team. Look, when you look at these numbers compared to what our midfield... I remember looking at these numbers for our midfield last year, and it was very, very different. Like Winks and Sissoko offered nowhere near these kind of numbers. But I also think sometimes he needs to be a bit smarter in how he tackles and presses and stuff. Because sometimes maybe he goes for a tackle when he shouldn't have and he couldn't make it, or sometimes he needs to work on his positioning rather than chasing a player around and stuff like that. So I think there's definitely stuff to work on, but there's definitely a very encouraging stuff. The amount of work he can get through in a season is pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're completely right, and I think that definitely what plays into the negative stats there is him being overplayed, in my opinion. Yeah. And I think that we've said it before with Højbjerg. Sometimes he's just a headless chicken in the middle of the park there.
And people obviously, because it was tweeted out, I think by Squawky yesterday, they tweeted out a stat saying Højbjerg was the most dribbled past player in the league last season, but also just discounts the fact that he also tackled the most dribblers last season. So it's not because he wasn't dribbled past the most because he's easy to get past. He dribbled past the most because he literally goes for every single player every single time, and then a lot of the times he gets it, a lot of the times he doesn't, and it's more to do with the volume of tackles attempted.
The nature of his work.
Exactly, it's more to do with the volume rather than the quality.
All right, let's move on to the sixth takeaway, and that is early risers.
So Spurs were like the best team in the league, like in the first 15 minutes this season, and it's such a shame we couldn't carry it on.
Villa were the second best team, right?
Yeah, only Man City scored more goals in opening 15 minutes of
City.
games than Tottenham this season. Only Man City. Man City scored 13, we scored 12. No team conceded fewer than Tottenham's 3 goals conceded in the opening 15 minutes of games, and only Spurs and West Ham were the only teams to not concede a single goal at home in the opening 15 minutes of games this season. So it's a shame we couldn't. I honestly think it was a direct tactic from Mourinho for those beginning parts of games to be very, very offensive and try and grab the lead, and then manage the game after that. Not necessarily. Obviously, we did sit back and we did end up dropping deeper and deeper. I'm not saying that was necessarily a specific tactic, but it was definitely a specific tactic for very early in the game, go very offensive and then try and manage the game once you take the lead.
Yeah, I don't think it was a tactic to kind of completely sit back under Jose Mourinho, but I think that's kind of the way it reverted literally every single time.
And maybe that was a disconnect between what the tactics actually were and what the players were bearing out, because maybe the players were thinking, okay, we've got our lead now in the first 50 minutes was the tactic. Now we're not going to go hell for leather for the rest of the game, but we're still going to try and manage it. And maybe they interpreted it in terms of we're going to sit back now. And maybe that was a bit of the problem.
He wanted to go more pragmatic for sure when we were leading, but he didn't want to completely nullify anything we had going forward.
And that's what ended up happening, unfortunately. But if we can carry on these opening 15 minutes, like in terms of going into the next season, it's important to have a good start to the game, I think.
Of course it is.
And I think we didn't take advantage of all the good starts we had, unfortunately. So hopefully that's something.
But it's more important to have a better finish than a better start.
It is, but you got to take the positive thing. Like with each cycle, you got to take positive things from it. And I think the way we started games a lot of the time, you got to just take that as a positive and hopefully implement that into next season, but obviously improve how we manage the rest of the game.
Yeah, I mean, if we had those kind of starts in a kind of Maurizio Pochettino system, it would have suited us a lot better because our players were a lot more fit to last all the way till the end.
Exactly.
Let's move on to the seventh takeaway, and that is late notice.
So obviously, as we talked about our good finishes, we had bad ends a lot of the time, and only West Brom and Southampton conceded more goals than Tottenham in the final 10 minutes of games. 11 goals we conceded in the final 10 minutes of games throughout the season, and it ended up costing us 11 points during the season, which obviously, if we would have got those 11 points, that would have been more than good enough to, I think, top 3 even that would have been. So that was very, very costly, and if we could have held up, even in like a quarter of those games, if we could have held out, we could have been we would have easily made top 4. So that is a massive, massive shame. And it obviously shows the fine margins, but also shows a problem which we never learned from during the season.
Do you reckon it was a fitness issue, a tactics issue, or just everything put together in one kind of thing?
Yeah, I don't know. What I think is a quality issue, I think, as well, in terms of the centre-backs. Whenever they were put under serious pressure, they cracked. And that was the problem, because obviously the most pressure you're ever going to get put under is the late in the game, isn't it?
Yeah.
When the team's chasing a result, they're always going to put under more pressure, and we couldn't deal with it. And that was obviously the main issue for me.
Yeah, and the majority of those games of what you're talking about, those 11 points, you could actually see the goal coming, couldn't you? Mm-hmm. From about probably 60th minute in or something like that.
Yeah.
Which was a real shame, but shame we couldn't hold out on at least 6 of those points.
Mm-hmm.
But let's move on to the 8th takeaway, and that is width issue.
Yeah, so we actually had quite a bad problem in terms of in the wide areas throughout the season. Spurs had the highest percentage of attacks that went through the centre in the whole Premier League. So the highest percentage of our attacks were in the 28% of our attacks were through the centre. So we like to basically control the game through the centre and try and create chances there, and we were very, very bad at basically making space and creating chances from wide areas, and that's why we kept going to the centre. And Spurs actually rank level with Palace the lowest in the Premier League for crosses put in the box.
Wow.
Throughout the season. We put in the lowest amount of crosses throughout the whole Premier League, and I think that shows a big problem when it comes to creating chances from wide areas, creating crosses. Apart from regular, when he did it on the odd occasion, we really struggled. And not only that, I think our wingers as well, because when you think about Son and Bale and Bergwijn, like how many chances did they really create from wide areas? Like all the good work Son does usually is him cutting inside, isn't it, and doing it from central areas. He doesn't. He did struggle a bit when he kind of out wide sometimes.
That was kind of more of his role in the second half of the season, Sonny, sticking out of the wide, putting crosses in the box. But when we scored the majority of our goals, which was in the first half of the season, he was always the one in the central area cutting in behind. Lucas Moura as well, his best work was done in a number 10 role. Eric Lamela, you could probably say his best work was done maybe more centrally. Steven Bergwijn as well, like whenever he was getting his chances, he was all kind of cutting in from centrally, like bearing down
and
one
even
on
Bale
one
always cutting in,
and Gareth Bale as well. So the only players really consistently putting balls into the box were Reguilon and Aurier.
And that was a problem. That's why we couldn't. And unfortunately, I mean, Reguilon for most of the season had good quality, but I feel like in general, especially, Reguilon wasn't playing every game. We had Davis, we had Doherty, and they're just not providing any sort of quality when on a pitch. But on the flip side of that, Spurs do rank second in the Premier League for goals from open play. Second, just behind City. Only Spurs are second to only City for goals from open play, and are fourth in the table for goals from counter-attack. So our attacking plan from those aspects worked. It's just how we build on that, and I think we definitely got to work on how we're building up attacks from wide areas, because clearly that was a big problem for us this season.
Yeah. I mean, far cry from the days of Aaron Lennon and Gareth Bell bombing down those wings and putting low crosses in and stuff like that.
Exactly.
Adebayor and people like that to finish them off. Do you remember how many goals did we get from wide areas?
So many. And he had like Chimbonda overlapping and whatever, and it was
Chorluka, please.
And Chorluka is out playing Lennon in behind time after time. Like, we were a good threat from wide areas, but now it seems like we really struggle when the ball's out wide to really have quality, either to like beat a man and put a cross in, or when you've got time and space deep in a deeper area to really put in a cross with real quality. We struggled.
Do you think that was a problem in Prime Poch as well? It wasn't, because we had Walker and Rose.
That was our biggest strength.
That's it. We had Walker and Rose completely bombing on. But what I'm saying is like, what I'm talking about with the wingers, because you had Eriksen on the right kind of drifting into a central role, and on the left-hand side you have Heung-min Son also drifting in.
Yeah, but you've got to think about how many times was Eriksen in that right-hand side half space whipping in, true. Cross after cross on point, like time after time, and we're just missing that at the moment. We don't really have a player like that.
And our attacking play has diminished so much since Walker and Rose, since we've had Pump, Walker and Rose.
And you got to think about as well, obviously, as I was talking about Eriksen, he's always that player in the half space. Right now, the only player in the squad who does that, you could say, is maybe Harry Kane. He's the only one who maybe gets in that half space and whips in dangerous crosses. When you look at Lo Celso and Ndombele, who are tasked with our creativity, all their work is pretty much, as I've said, through the centre. That's what they do. Ndombele, all his good work on Ndombele is all through the centre, all playing progressive passes in and around the penalty area, and Gio as well, all through the centre. They don't really like being in the wide areas, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Most definitely. Let's look at the 9th takeaway, and that is shooting ourselves in the foot.
So we all know we've done that a lot this season. Now we're shooting ourselves in the foot. Only Man City, Chelsea, and Man United have conceded less goals from open play this season than Tottenham. Spurs conceded 25. Chelsea and United have conceded 23. However, where Spurs and also Spurs are the only team in the league to concede 0 goals from counter-attacks last season.
Oh, really?
So we're the only team in the league to concede zero from counter-attacks. So now I hear you ask, so what's the problem? Where's the defensive problem? Well, the problem is we keep shooting ourselves in the foot. As I mentioned before, we lead the way in for penalties from goals conceded from penalties. We're actually first, because West Brom, despite conceding more penalties, we
lead the way for individual errors.
Not individual errors, but we are second in the table for own goals as well. So own
How
goals.
many have we scored?
So 4 own goals apparently. So for own goals and for penalties, we lead the way, and that's bigger. That's the biggest problem.
Sanchez got 1. Reguilon got 1.
Sanchez got 1. Reguilon got 1.
Did Dyer get 1?
Toby got 1 against Leicester.
Toby.
And off the top of my head, I can't remember. Potentially Dyer, but I don't remember one.
Yeah, I can't remember which game it was, but it's got to be Dyer, surely.
Probably Dyer. I can't remember off the top of my head, but I know those 3 for sure.
Unless Sanchez had another one, but I can't remember off the top of my head.
I can't. Was that one against Palace, that an own goal? No, that was Schlupp goal. I don't know. I can't remember off the top of my head, but those three at least that are all own goals. So those are our biggest. Those were our biggest failings because from open play, we're actually pretty solid. 25 goals conceded the whole season from open play, which is pretty good. Only two off the top as well.
We were banging on about that all season. We were like, if we can cut out these individual errors, cut out these stupid defensive set plays that we're conceding or stupid
but even
penalties.
Set pieces, we were the 12th lowest. So we weren't great, but we weren't like awful either. But it's more from penalties and own goals. That's where we lead the way, and that's that goes down to quality defenders at the end of the day.
Yeah. All right, and let's move on to the last and final takeaway, and that is smart fouls from the Jose Mourinho playbook.
And that goes down to Spurs ranked 4th in the whole Premier League for fouls per game, but they only ranked 10th for yellow cards. So we're making a lot of fouls in very smart areas.
Yellow
However,
card.
Spurs rank 2nd for being fouled in a game, and that obviously plays into the fact that teams recognise that if you slow the flow of a game down, that's the most effective way of stopping Spurs. Because as we mentioned before, free kicks we're not very good at. Set pieces, I think we're in the bottom half of the table for scoring set pieces. But when it comes to open play, we're actually very effective. We're 2nd in goals for open play, and we're 4th in goals for counter attack. So that's why I think Spurs are 2nd when it comes to being fouled most in games, because I think teams worked out if you foul us a lot, that's when we tend to struggle.
So basically disrupt our rhythm and we'll shit the bed, basically.
Pretty much, and that's pretty much what's happened all season. So I think that was interesting to know, and it's interesting to know we're being a bit smarter with our fouls than we were last season, but we just need to work on how to manage that, and we need to work on when we're being fouled often. We need to work on our set pieces and being able to work on that aspect of the game, because at the moment that's a weak point that's letting us down. It's costing us games because people have worked us out from open play.
All right, so those are the 10 takeaways from the season just gone. So let me just run through those takeaways with you one more time. So that was overpowered front line, lucky defence, paying the penalty, free kick shocker, Hoyer workhorse, early risers, late notice, width issue, shooting ourselves in the foot, and smart fouls. Those are our 10 takeaways from the pretty much disastrous season that has just finished. But let me know if you have any other extra takeaways in the comment section below. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always,
come on, you Spurs.